I'm back for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Today we're diving into some, let's just say spicy commentary on the whole India-Canada situation.
Yeah, definitely some strong opinions flying around.
For sure, our listeners sent in some pretty interesting stuff, specifically from foreign affairs expert Rabinder Sachdev. Have you heard of him?
Oh yeah, Sakhtev's, he's known for, well, not holding back.
Exactly. He's basically saying that Canada's trying to teach India a lesson.
Ooh, strong words.
Right. He even uses terms like global propaganda.
Wow. So what exactly is he saying Canada's doing? Like, what actions is he pointing to?
Well, one of his main points is that um, Canada's trying to make India look bad on the world stage, you know, trying to portray them as a threat.
A threat to whom or to what?
Yeah, to the, as he puts it, Western-dominated order.
Ah, there's that phrase. That's a loaded one.
Yeah, maybe we should unpack that a bit. For our listeners who might not be familiar with the term, what does it actually mean in, like, practical terms?
Right. Well, it's a complex idea, but basically it refers to the way global power has been structured, for much of the past century, the institutions and norms that, well, that have shaped international relations.
So things like the UN.
Exactly. The UN Security Council, the World Bank, even the influence of Western media and pop culture. Those are all elements of what we often call the Western-dominated order.
Got it. So is Sachdev implying that Canada sees India as, like, trying to disrupt this whole system?
Possibly. I mean, you have to consider that India is becoming a major player on the global scene, right? Economically, militarily.
Yeah.
And their foreign policy has become a lot more assertive in recent years. So some in the West might perceive that as a challenge to the status quo.
Makes sense. And Canada being, well, a historically Western-aligned nation, they might be reacting to this shift in the balance of power.
That's one way to look at it. Though, to be fair, there are other possible interpretations of Canada's actions, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to acknowledge that, things are rarely black and white in international relations.
Right. It's never just one thing. So some people argue that Canada's stance is actually driven by sincere concerns about human rights in India, not necessarily some calculated strategy.
Yeah, it's important to consider that perspective.
It really highlights the complexity of the situation. Different interpretations can exist alongside each other, and it's not always easy to say definitively which one is right.
Absolutely. It's a complex web of motivations and actions. Speaking of complexity, let's bring it back to our listeners for a moment. How could all this tension between these two countries impact people, even indirectly?
Well, don't forget, India and Canada have pretty deep economic ties, trade, investment, even tourism.
Right.
So if the relationship keeps deteriorating, those ties could definitely be strained. And that has the potential to impact, well, pretty much everyone in some way.
Like how? Give us some examples.
Well, prices for goods and services could be affected, job markets could fluctuate, even things like travel and immigration policies could be impacted.
Wow, so the ripple effects could be pretty far-reaching.
Definitely. And that's why it's important to keep an eye on these developments and understand the potential implications.
For sure. So to recap, we've got this expert basically saying that Canada is trying to undermine India on the world stage, though the reasons behind it are complicated and, well, open to interpretation. And all of this could have some pretty big consequences.
Precisely.
Which leads us to, I think, a really important question. What role could other nations play in all of this?
Right. I mean, is this something where we might see allies stepping in and trying to mediate? Or, could this actually escalate into a bigger geopolitical conflict?
A lot to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive for today, everyone. Thanks for listening. Keep exploring these ideas, and we'll see you next time.
Until then.